This episode of Storyworthy is brought to you by the Manhattan Comedy School. I'll be teaching a 6-week podcasting class starting October 29th. It's a 6-week course, 3 hours a week, so that's a total of 18 hours of instruction. And guess what? I'm having guest speakers come in and tell you about their own podcasting journey, like Lori Kilmartin, Adam Ferreira, David Feldmann, Alonzo Bowden, and Jackie Cation. So head over to manhattancomedyschool.com or my own website, christineblackburn.com, for more information. I'd love to see you guys there. Hey, this is Christine from Storyworthy. Today on the show, comedian and comedy writer Eddie Feldmann talks about the night Johnny Carson died.
Dennis Miller Live on HBO was kind of a big deal for my career. I did it for 10 years. The Apprentice was going at that time, so we had as our guest Donald Trump, and Melania came in, and I just remember because we were in this small little studio, and Trump basically came in and looked around like, what the fuck is this? All of a sudden, Dennis came in and said, Johnny Carson passed away. Do you want to go over to see the Tonight Show tonight? They're kind of doing, a memorial, and the two guests are going to be Don Rickles and Bob Newhart. So we go to the Tonight Show, we go to the green room backstage, and then there's Rickles is there, Newhart is there, and there's also Gilbert Gottfried.
Today on the show, comedy writer Eddie Feldmann talks about the night Johnny Carson died. Stay close.
Hey, my name is Eddie Feldmann, and you're listening to Storyworthy.
Welcome to Storyworthy. My name is Christine Blackburn, and I'm coming to you from Los Angeles, California. Whether you're a longtime fan of the show of over 10 years, that's a lot of content, or you're a brand new listener, welcome to Storyworthy. Now, I hope you guys had the opportunity to listen to Steph Zamorano last week. Do you know Steph by any chance, Eddie?
No, I don't, but I did listen to the podcast. It was really interesting.
Oh, cool. It's about her getting busted for drugs at school, and the caveat is that she was the teacher.
Yeah.
Womp womp.
Why not?
Really funny.
Yeah.
Super funny. And she's just smart anyway. So I love her, you guys. So go back, listen to Steph Zamorano last week. But not today, because today I'm here with a really interesting guy who's super accomplished. Eddie Feldmann is here with me today. And he's one of those guys, you guys, who is just like, I'm going to call you Mr. Hollywood. There, you heard me.
Interesting.
Now, you've just done so many things, though. You've been in the business a long time, and you've done so many things across the board, including writing and producing. But you also have been a showrunner, and I don't know if people know what that means.
Well, a showrunner, it's funny. I did something once with a new writer, and at the end of this thing, it was the NASCAR Sprint Cup Awards with Reba McEntire.
Oh, wow.
So you kind of had to take it from, the very beginning. And this was a comedian who then was a great writer, and then I hired for that. And at the end of it, he goes, if this is what showrunning is, I'm not sure I want to do it. Because a showrunner basically, especially in this non-scripted comedy world, you start at nothing. You might have a guest, a host, and then they're like, okay, in 6 weeks, you have to hire 100 people. You need to figure out what the show is. It's almost like building a jet and then having to land it 3,000 miles away. So a showrunner, hires the talent, works with the host, and it's a big undertaking. It's like a circus you're putting together.
So a showrunner runs the show.
Correct. Yeah. And they're different in that, I come out of it as a stand-up and as a writer and then a producer. Sometimes they're more of the line producer, but in this world, in comedy especially, it's somebody who can not only write jokes, edit jokes, help other people, hire a staff, and then, a lot of times be in the edit bays to edit everything. So yeah, you're the soup to nuts guy or woman.
Yeah. You know what else I know about showrunners is you have to be very likable, because if you're not a likable showrunner, nobody, it's going to be tension working with you. Like you have to go like department to department and get everybody to collaborate in a very cool and, non-stressful way. I mean, this is all creative, right?
Right. Yeah. It's like, somebody, the writer said, oh, you're like a velvet hammer. I thought that was a good way to put it, where, you're like, okay, how do I motivate these people? It's a lot of work, and, and you're supposed to have a good time. And I used to do a lot of games and things where people didn't want. It was before I did this, I used to work with emotionally disturbed kids. So that was a great training ground, because it's very, Drew Carey, once I told him, he said, oh, it's kind of a lateral move between that and college.
It is because
Yes.
you have to have patience with people that are super creative, and, their brilliance can be found from like going off.
That's right. Yeah. And it's like, you want to keep that. You don't want to stymie it. But at the same time, you have to create a structure that you find that creative people will tell you they don't want, but they really crave. They want to know, like, okay, when is that due? When do I handing that in? How much do you need? And so the more organized you are, the better the show is, and the better that they'll be able to write and get a better product at the end.
I agree. What you're talking about, all of this in the world of Los Angeles and Hollywood, this is regular talk to us. This is like inside baseball. But to other people, it's kind of very foreign. So when you were talking about a line producer, that's completely different. A line producer is somebody that basically hires the crew, right?
Well, a line producer. So what you do is you take a host, and you're like, okay, and you create what the show basically is going to be. How many nights a week? What's it about? Is it very stand-up oriented? Are there sketches and things? And then the line producer comes in and says, okay, works with the showrunner and goes, let's budget that. How many writers do you need? What kind of writers? Are there going to be remotes? That's a different price point than if everything's in studio. So that's the other part. You work closely with a line producer and coming up with what the show costs.
Right. And then just to be clear, the line producer is hired from the executive producer, who is basically putting the money up for the project.
Well, that's the network would be putting the money up. So I work for the network. And then most of the times, sometimes I get to hire the line producer, and other times, well, mostly all that. But there's the other thing is, in between the line producer and network, there might be an executive in charge, they call it. And that person basically says, well, wait a minute, line producer, we're not going to give you that money for this. We're going to give you this money. So make it work.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. It's such an interesting business. I had a show on USA Network about 10 years, 15 years ago for 2 years. And I saw all of it working. It was a kind of a small scale thing. It was like, it was called Ready for the Weekend Movie. And they were little interstitials. Yeah. We'd go around to different cities, right? But even on that tiny scale, there was about 14 people in our, on our show, as it were. And I would watch them, like around the office. And it was just really interesting to me how it's technical, to all these pieces to come together.
Yeah.
It's creative, but it's also very technical.
Yeah, it's like, how do you, and and at different times I've gone into shows that kind of, are a little off track. And it's funny because I don't know if you've ever been to Hershey, Pennsylvania, where the Hershey,
Dude, I'm from Pittsburgh.
Oh, okay.
Are you kidding? Yeah, of course I know Hershey. We would go through the little train in the thing, and you get a chocolate.
Right. It would take you from a chocolate bean to a Hershey bar. And basically, when I go into a show, the way I can see how a show works is say, okay, I wrote a joke. How will this joke get on the show? And if you'll have to tell me, because I can follow it through a process. And if you don't know the process, okay, now I see where the issues are. Just like that.
I love it.
The chocolate.
I love it. Yes. It's like a big puzzle. That's really funny.
Yeah.
Sometimes, because I produce a lot of shows as well. I mean, podcasts, and also I have a Zoom show going. But it's so funny. Somebody will say, like, well, what is a producer? How do you make a movie or a show?
Right.
Well, you got to make a lot of calls, make a lot of phone calls.
Yeah.
You got to talk to a lot of people.
Yeah, it's funny. The other part of my training, my parents had a grocery store in Delicatessen, so I worked at since I was a kid. And I always describe it like, hey, at lunch there's going to be a rush. That's our show. Well, okay, you have to start prepare for it when? The day before. Same thing with a TV show. You can't do it last minute. our lunch rush was basically a show. And are you ready for it? Do
Yeah.
you have everything you need for it? And that's how, so between the working with those kids and the deli, that was my training ground.
It's so funny. Just this morning on Twitter, that crazy Kaylee
Mackinac,
McEnany or
yeah.
whatever. Yeah. So she tweets something like, the media is against us, the liberals against us, Hollywood is against us, but Donald Trump is for the working people or something like that. And I tweeted back like sometimes I just can't help it,
Yeah,
right? I
yeah.
tweeted back like I wrote it. I wrote writers, actors, producers, crew people. These are the hardest working people I know. These are blue collar jobs.
Yeah,
Like, don't
yeah,
even, what are you talking about? I
yeah.
mean, and then I wrote at the end, do you watch television? Do you watch movies? How do you think that happens?
Yeah, it's that thing. I remember, a long time ago, going to Washington D.C. and sitting with like Republican senators at the time, like 5 or 6 of them, and their thing was, how come Hollywood doesn't like us? Why aren't they doing stories about us? And part of it was, well, you're kind of the big guys. A whole thing of this comedy is to take you guys down. You're
Yeah,
already on the top. That's not how it works. I mean, you don't see jokes about, it's a David and Goliath. That's just how things work. Your guys
that's right.
are the bad guys in some way. Not that's always bad, but you're like,
Right.
it's like, oh, in support, how am I going to make fun of poor people? That's not going to happen. You
Right,
guys are the
right.
ones who are being kind of idiots at times, and it's easier. You're easy targets.
Oh man, I'm telling you, this is just the craziest. Obviously, it's the craziest time. I was listening to you on another show. Was it Eddie Pepitone? No, that was somebody else. Maybe
No.
that was Dave Feldman. Remember, I
Oh
told you
yeah,
I've been
yeah,
listening to a lot of
yeah,
people
yeah.
with the last name Feldman. Anyway, just everybody has their own pandemic story, and you are in San Rafael, California. You
Yes,
said
yeah, just outside.
so.
It's
You
in Marin,
went, yeah. So you went to a a natural disaster.
basically. What do you mean?
Well, you
So
went toward the
I went,
wildfires.
yeah,
They
but
were
it
going
wasn't.
on.
Yeah, they weren't burning then. So I came,
Oh, I
kind
see.
of took a break from LA with the idea of like, hey, let's go up to a different. My wife's, sister and brother-in-law. Let's go up, take a
Sure.
break, then we'll come back to LA. And in the meantime, when the pandemic hit, Hollywood basically shut down, and any of the projects I was working with shut down. And so, now they're just starting to get back, hopefully. So
Yeah.
we'll make our way back to LA, but it's been a nice respite. If you have to be somewhere,
Sure.
it's a
Sure.
nice
Yeah,
little
it's a
place.
beautiful
Marin's a
place
beautiful
for
place. Yeah,
sure.
yeah,
It really is. It really is a pretty place up there.
yeah. But then it started
Anyway,
it started burning, and then we're like, okay, but hey, that's all part of
yeah.
it. You're not
Yeah, I
escaping.
guess.
Yeah.
I don't know. This is all just so if like one more thing goes crazy, I just this election has me losing sleep. It has me reaching out every day. I try to reach out to 2 people I know from Pennsylvania, where I'm from, to try to,
Right.
because that's such an important state.
Yes, it is.
So I'm trying to, everybody has to do what they can do to save our democracy.
No, it
Isn't
is.
that crazy? But it's true. I mean, we're on the precipice of an authoritative regime. Do you agree?
Yeah. Oh no, I definitely see it. Especially being wrapped up a little, in politics over these years in the comedy scheme of things, and you see that. I don't think I've ever voted for a Republican, but I became friendly with Senator McCain because we had a mutual friend and had written some
Interesting.
comedy for him,
Uh huh.
and got to sit with him for a couple hours before he ran for the presidency, and really hear like, oh, okay, I don't always agree with him, but we sat and were able to talk, and he was the one for 2 hours. I sat on his couch and talked about global warming and showed us
That's
pictures, and
amazing.
so yeah, you went from that to now what's happening with Trump, and it's like, well, this is an insanity type of thing. It's almost like there's a cartoon, because people ask like, how do you write for Trump? It's like like a joke on a joke. I mean,
Yeah,
he's
it's
already.
really hard. Yeah, I can imagine that being hard. I don't know if they're still doing that. It was an animated series, The Trumps. It was Stephen Colbert, I
Yeah, yeah,
think,
I think, yeah, I'm
produced
not
it.
sure if they're doing it, but yeah,
But at one point, it was so funny. But now, like you said, it would just be like you couldn't even proposed to have done what he's done in a cartoon. I mean, it
No,
just
no.
wouldn't even make. Nobody would say that. The whole first family has COVID.
Yeah. No, you can't. Like you said, if you wrote this and you pitched it to a network, they go, no one's going to buy that. They don't. That can't happen. You're like, okay. Oh, then there's this guy Ted Cruz. And what happens is he's going to make fun of him and his wife. Then later, that guy is going to go and support this guy who made fun of his wife. It's like, yeah, but that wouldn't happen. It's like, yeah.
Yeah, you would say that's not a good storyline.
Yeah,
It would
it's like,
never
no, I
happen.
won't believe it.
Now, you, I know, have won multiple Emmy Awards, and one of them was for HBO's Dennis Miller Live, right?
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
What the hell happened to him?
Yeah. And you know what? Today, my story is going to involve him and take you through
good.
some certain things. But as far as, where our politics had separated a good 10 years ago, he'll tell you he was somewhat conservative, I guess. But he was also around very liberal writers. So at times he would come in with some sort of idea. And then once he got talking to us about it, you're like, oh, I didn't see that. I thought this. Then, once that show sort of ended and you're kind of on your own devices, I don't think he had those people around him. And he got more and more into as we call it, the dark side. So,
well, and then they embrace him because of they don't have anybody, they don't have any talent on their team, so of course they embrace him.
Yeah.
But then he's just such a goof because he uses like those big words and stuff.
Yeah.
And it's
Yeah.
like, who do you think you're talking to? Why are you trying to impress these people?
Yeah, that's kind of him. And like I said, I don't. One of the things that I found out working with comedians including myself, we're all somewhat self-destructive. And you find that, there's guys I've worked with who are really famous and you're like, what? You know what? You're ruining it for yourself. In fact, I joke around, that movie, The Joker, which, which is about a stand-up. I'm like, oh no, he wasn't self-destructive enough. In real life, that would have been, he still had a career, even though he shot the host. Now they thought they were going to make him.
Movie.
Yeah, but I've known guys who are like, it's like all you need to do is just tell the network that you really love this project, and then we get a go for it, and then on the phone they'll like kill it, and then they're like, well, the network doesn't work. It's like all you had to do is what? It's just stand-ups pick the one job when you think about it. They really solitary. You don't really talk to anybody. You talk at them. You come into a club. You're your time. You leave. And so
yeah, you stick to your opinion. You stick to your guns. I mean, it's a conversation with the audience, but you're still in control.
Right,
obviously.
right. So that's but yes, in this story, Dennis does play a central part, and this was before he had gone off the rails, as some people will say. But
I think you used to work with my old boyfriend as well, Mike Gandolfi. Yeah.
Oh yeah, that's right. Sure, Mike was on the shows with me, and
Dennis Miller.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we had a nice guy.
He's a great guy. He kept his Emmy Award in a Trader Joe's bag at the bottom of the coat closet.
That's funny. Yeah, I remember he had a great line once to Dennis. There was, I don't know what was, Dennis smelled something, and then and Dennis said, "What's that smell?" And Mike said, "Success, baby. Get used to it." That was hilarious.
He's a smart guy, man. Super smart guy. All right. Well, listen, your topic tonight, I'm so excited. I'm not excited about the actual topic, but it's intriguing. The night Johnny Carson died. And, the listeners of my show here know that I was a huge Johnny Carson fan, still am. And my father was especially a huge fan and wanted to be Johnny Carson.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. But my father was 32 years old and had 6 kids. So that wasn't happening. And, but every night I would fall asleep to the sound of, the Tonight Show starting. And,
right. Yeah, me too.
Yeah, I would hear the TV, I would hear my dad laugh. I would hear the music, then I'd hear my dad laugh, and then I'd hear the TV, then my dad laugh. And there's this kind of muffled thing, but I kept hearing my dad laughing, which meant he was super happy. And
Yeah.
then the monologue would end, and generally then he would push the button on the Zenith TV, and you'd
Yeah.
hear the poof, and then I would hear the couch opening because me and my sister slept in the living room. So
Uh,
I'd hear him open up the couch and then come into the bedroom where my parents' bedroom, take us out of my parents' bedroom and take us out to the fold-out couch. I would always pretend I was sleeping, but of course I was awake.
right. Yeah.
And then he'd lay us there in the bed, and then 6:30 a.m. my mom's back up, lights on, fold up the couch, go to
Yep.
school.
Yeah. Yeah. No. No. And I've talked to a lot of people that same thing of getting into comedy because they snuck and listened to Johnny Carson when they were supposed to be sleeping.
Yeah, isn't that something? Yeah, it's really. Well, it wasn't just even listening to his jokes, it was listening to my dad laughing, and it made him so happy,
Oh yeah.
And
Yeah.
now I've had the pleasure of having on so many people that have done Carson, like Kathy Ladman and Wendy Liebman,
Yeah.
Judy Gold. I think Judy did it.
I think so too. Yeah.
Yeah. Anyway, so it's just I feel so lucky to meet people who were there and with him at that time. And anyway, I'm excited to hear about your story, Eddie. Thank you so much in advance.
Oh, sure. Yeah. No, and it kind of takes you through the late night world and leads up to the Carson thing, and you'll recognize some of the people I talk about as I go through it.
Well, I'm super excited. All right, you guys, let's get over to Eddie. But wait a minute. Before we do, I did want to remind you guys that the story-worthy Hour of Power is still going strong. We're on our 24th show. You heard me, 24 Sundays in a row during the pandemic. I'll entertain you. I'll take the job on. So remember, you guys, go to storyworthypodcast.com, find out who's on the show this week. And remember, it starts at 6 p.m. Pacific time. And following the Hour of Power, we go into Story Smash, the storytelling game show with Blanca Patch, Danny Zucker, and a lot of amazing people. A couple weeks ago, I had on Kevin Nealon, and I've had on Judy Gold and some amazing people. Eddie, you have to do it. You'll have to come
Yeah,
on
I'd love to do
Story
it.
Smash. Yeah,
Yeah.
you'll be a wonderful judge. It's super fun, you guys. So remember, every Sunday night, 6 p.m. Pacific time, get your tickets over at storyworthypodcast.com. And remember, there's always a free option. There's always a free option. I'm a
Of course.
giver. I'm a
Should be.
giver,
Yeah.
Eddie. Yeah, why not?
Exactly.
All
Yeah.
right, you guys. Eddie Feldmann is here right now. I'm so excited to have you on. You have written on iconic shows like we were talking about. HBO's Dennis Miller Live, Law and Order, the Emmy Awards, the ESPY Awards. You did the Showbiz show with David Spade. I forget which show
Yes.
that was.
So that was on Comedy Central, and that was David. He had just done one just recently. That was a half-hour kind of takedown of show business that
Yeah.
was on. It was a while ago, maybe 8 years ago.
Yeah.
So that ran for like 3 or 4 seasons over there.
Yeah, he
But,
keeps
yeah.
working. Good for him, man. Good for
Yeah,
him.
in fact, yeah. One time we were in a temporary office, and this was this paper sign on the door. It said his name. A delivery guy came, and the door was locked. And he looked at me, and he looked at the sign and said David Spade Show, and he looked at me, and goes, "He's always working."
Oh, that
It's hilarious. I go, the delivery guy knows
That
he's always getting
is
stuff.
such a Hollywood moment. That's really
Yeah.
funny. Yeah, that's super
Yeah.
funny. Now, I know you wrote, and you even mentioned it earlier, you wrote for the NASCAR Sprint Cup Awards. What does that even mean? I mean, in other words, you don't know about NASCAR, do you?
Well,
I do now.
No. Yeah. Well, yeah. I mean, so different. Part of writing for comedy and things. There's like you'll do award shows, the Critics' Choice Awards, the Emmy Awards, that. So I had the opportunity. Then they were like, "Hey, we do the NASCAR Sprint Cup Awards." Is like every year they hand out the big award, the Super Bowl award, and they build a show around it. So I got hired to kind of put that together. I really didn't know that much about. I had been to a NASCAR thing because I had filmed it for another show, but really, yeah, you kind of have to like learn what it is. I had a friend who loved NASCAR who was also a writer, so I hired him, this other comedian, and then you have to kind of like be enveloped in NASCAR. and then they hired Reba McEntire as the host. So it's like it's the Emmy Awards for NASCAR, really.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, she's fabulous as well, and always working.
Always working. And she was, I'll tell you, she was really one of the nicest people to work with. I mean, and not only just nice, but, we gave her the monologue. She's like, oh, just put some commas in here. I get it. She went out and sold it, like 110%. And she was just great to work with.
She's a pro, man. She's an absolute pro. Yeah, she really is. I've worked with Melissa Peterman several times, and Melissa, of course, played her best friend on the Reba show. Or Reba,
yeah, right.
And Melissa's such a great person. And anyway, just really strong women. I love those girls. So, real quick though, with NASCAR, so what are you looking for? You're looking for jokes about cars, the drivers, the pit crew.
Yeah, so that, but also about NASCAR is a very internal, or these drivers start when they're 14 at local tracks. They're unlike football players and basketball players that come out of college. That's their education is really cars. So you have to be careful. You can't really make fun of them. You have to find other things to do, clips of things. For Reba, they wanted to open with some sort of sketch, something, and it was like with that, we basically took her what her wardrobe would be for the NASCAR thing, and we used a pit crew to shoot something so that she was in street clothes, and within 90 seconds with a ticking clock, her crew came in and changed her into her outfit. So we had that, and then we had a time limit. It's like, oh, you only get her for this amount of time, and you got to turn it around for the show the next day. So we had to shoot it, get her, into everything. We had a NASCAR car that was painted for Reba. So all that planning, and then shoot it, and then overnight edit it, get it ready to fold into the show, because it was shot in Vegas, and then work on her monologue, put it all together, all for, in a short amount of time.
I have to tell you, that is like such a great description of what it means to. I have to tell you, that is such a great description of what it means to take, something from nothing. And I want the NASCAR fans out there to know, that this is what Hollywood people do. If you want to talk about Hollywood people, this is the work that goes into it step by step. It's just not magical. It's not going to just appear. Somebody has to make these things happen little by little. It's a tremendous amount of small things coming together to make a big thing. And I don't think they respect the work that goes into that.
Yeah, there's like that. I mean, you think about, you go to a race and you're like, hey, these cars go around in circles. It's like, no, these are multi-million-dollar organizations, and they have to be fine-tuned. That's really what a show is. Okay, we have our own pit crews, our own technical stuff. At the end, you see the finished product, which is, again, the race. But for us, that's the show. And all those people around it, those 100 people, are not the people you see walking around Beverly Hills. They wouldn't even be in show business. It's the people that live in Topanga and live, in West LA, that go, early in the morning and shoot the show and edit the show. That's what really Hollywood really is.
Of course,
it's just
working people. Yeah.
Yes, right.
Because sometimes people that don't understand the business of show, they think there's an actor and a director. That's it. They don't even know about the cameraman. They don't even know about the lighting people.
People think that, when they watch a late night show, that's it's like, oh, those hosts, they just make up the jokes on the spot.
Yeah, they're so smart and quick-witted, aren't they?
Yeah, and it's like Dennis Miller's rant. It's like, oh, he was really funny. It's like, well, that took a week and, 8 writers and a lot of time. And we went from,
And a big dictionary. Yeah.
A big dictionary. Yeah. And the same thing on those, like what you see now with John Oliver. It's like, hey, they make it look easy, but there's a big group of people that make it look easy.
Yeah, that's absolutely right. Well, listen, I could talk about your bio for the next 30 minutes, but I don't want to do that. I do want to say you have produced series and pilots for everybody: NBC, ABC, CBS, HBO, Fox, everybody. But now, have you done Netflix and Hulu and things like that? Have you been trying to get into those guys?
Yeah, yes, I have. And, that's kind of where the pandemic kind of came in and stymied things, because there were projects that I had that were ready to go, but no one's shooting. So now I'm just getting back now with different things for that I've set up, and we'll be now hopefully getting back on track with these shows. So it's again that process of creating a show, of things, finding hosts, getting production companies, and then getting ready to get them going.
Well, I have said it again and again, like week after week. I'm so impressed by people's, the comics and the writers that come on my show, the ingenuity that people are showing to do stuff now and, keep going ahead, even though we're all so far apart.
Yeah. So the things that we've, been working on really, again, especially comedy in that world is like, well, you can't have an audience. And if you don't have an audience, how do you do, comedy? Because people, it's just to silence. No, it's like no one's laughing. Oh, there's no one there. So now we're just getting to where it seems we're kind of getting back on track. So I have like 3 or 4 things that, hopefully in the next month or so.
Yeah, you have a new project.
Forward.
You have a new project called Super Funny. Is that right?
Oh, yeah. So Super Funny, which again, take a while, it was been developed, and we did at the Improv for almost 2 years. Ben Morrison, who's a funny comedian, I worked with him on this telethon to get out the vote thing for Michelle Obama a couple of years ago for the midterms. And so when he was telling me about it, so really it's comedians using multimedia to tell stories about their lives in ways that you may know about a comic, but you're like, oh, I didn't know this is where they come from or what they do. Yeah. So, and then using really that for their shows, we use sort of keynote, which lets you, the comic, say, look at my sister. What was going on with her hair? Oh, well, we always do that as stand-ups, but we don't see the picture. Here you're kind of seeing, we'll take you through a small section of their lives.
I love that so much.
Yeah. So we have a production company now. We're just ready, just getting it ready now to go out. And, that would be a good Netflix show. We're looking.
But are you going to use animation as well then? You'll have animators?
This is all long. I mean, it's anything is possible. Yes. In the past, there has been, even in the live shows, we've used animation. We've used, if you're a musical comedian, if there's a short film that tells the story of a certain part of your life, we'll use that. And then we'll also use images from your past.
It just sounds like such a fun idea. I love it. It's so creative.
Yeah, and when we're done, I'll send you one of the examples from the Improv that we use a lot. Owen Smith, who's a really funny comedian, basically used pictures from when he was on, played on kids' basketball teams as a reason to say, I know basketball. Here's the greatest basketball player of all time. So it's like here. And so he did it in a really clever way. And, you see the timing because he's been doing stand-up for a long time. And people watch that, and go, wow, that seems like it could be the future of comedy. And it's like, yeah.
I love that idea. It's basically like having the punchline be the photo.
Right, yes. Now, and you've seen that like on the Showbiz Show with David Spade for some of these pieces now. And you see Colbert use it too. It's like, yeah.
And you also see it in TED Talks.
Yes, right. So this is kind of like, comedian meet TED Talk and type of thing, where instead of just, there's a graph, there's a picture that, helps to really punch the comedy.
All right, you guys, listen, I'm so excited for your story. So let's get right to it. All right, you guys, wherever you are, please put your hands together for the amazing Eddie Feldmann.
Yeah, thank you. So as we were talking, yes, I would say people say, Dennis Miller Live on HBO was kind of a big deal for my career. I did it for 10 years. It was hard to believe that on that long. And we were, won a lot of awards. We really opened up a lot of doors for me. And then as in everything, it's like, okay, that ended. What do we do next? And so I did a talk show again with Dennis for CNBC for 2 years, around 2004, 2005. It was an experiment for them because they, CNBC was a financial network. They were trying this out. Jeff Zucker's like, they wanted to, get Dennis on their network again. And before that, my first job really was working he had a syndicated show that was on Tribune. And that's how he picked me to come out and work on the show.
Was it called the Dennis
It
Miller
was
Show
the
as
Dennis
well?
Miller Show, yeah, and it was 5 nights a week. It was really, they had thought like, oh, he could be the replacement for Carson. It was syndicated. Of course, you're like, well, he's not Johnny Carson. He's very different, coming from Pittsburgh, as you
He's
know.
not
No, yeah,
likable.
no, he's like a spice. He just had a burst of it, and so but it got me out here. In fact, part of this story is I took Norm Macdonald's place on the writing staff, and I knew Norm for years and years. He went to go work on Roseanne, but also because Norman's Norm, he was also only giving one joke a day for the staff, and then we're like, and then it's like one, and then somebody told me, goes, yeah, but in Norm's defense, Dennis asked him for a writing sample, and Norm only gave him one joke, so he was hired on one joke, and so he continued just to write one joke. So Norm is, I've worked with him for years. I know him well. He's such a character.
Hilarious.
One time before he left, we were still working together, and we were walking down Sunset Boulevard, and there was a place there called the Spaghetti Factory. I don't know if you know where it was. It's like a chain of that big sort of place. And as we walk by, Norm says, and he goes, "I see that." And I'm like, "Yeah, Norm, what?" He goes, "They go to the Spaghetti Factory." He goes, "Yeah, I worked there." I go, "You work there?" I go, "What do you mean you work there? I heard stories that you can't cook." He goes, "Nah, I can't cook." I go, "Well, what were you doing there?" Is what? He goes, "As a cook." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, I got in from Canada. I didn't have any money, and they had a help wanted sign. They wanted a cook. So I went and filled out the application and made up all these names of restaurants, and I got hired." I'm like, "Well, what happened?" He goes, "Well, I started, to work for lunch. I'm behind this giant stove. All these people came in and started yelling at me. I don't know anything. I can't even boil water." I go, "What did you do?" He goes, "I just left." I go, "So at lunch you just left?" And he's like, "Yeah, I just left. I don't know how to cook." And so it's like, it just
He's
went.
such a funny dude. And the thing about Norm Macdonald is you never really know like if he's in a character or not. I mean, I totally believe that, but I mean, he's just always like it's so quirky. He's so
Yeah.
funny.
So that's how I kind of got that. I had been writing while I was in New York. I had been sending, he'd been paying me to send stuff in, and then I moved quickly, so that's how I got here. But then the HBO show, then the CNBC things, happened. Dennis had moved up to Santa Barbara in the meantime, and so NBC was like, "Hey, we want you to show." And, it's like, well, that's a 2-hour commute each way. And he kept saying, "No, I don't want to do it." And Jeff Zucker's like, "We want you to do it." They even threw in a helicopter ride a day, and they kept, he was like, okay, he agreed because the money was good, not thinking like, "Hey, do you want to commute that much?" And, so he would have Dennis actually would have loved COVID because quarantine mean I can just shoot at my house. And, so anyway, from the start, it was always like, I was like, "I want to do a topical show, but I only want to come in one day a week." It's like, okay, I don't know how I make that happen. I mean, and then CNBC never did comedy, before. And the guy they hired to kind of run that part of it was very nice. But I told Dennis, I go, "I know we're in trouble." He goes, I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Well, that guy, he got back from Morton's and was really happy and excited because he saw Alan Thicke at lunch." I'm like, okay, all right. That made him excited. And then he asked Dennis, he's like, "Well," he goes, "why do you think people will watch the show?" I'm like, that's not a good thing to ask a guy who's on Saturday Night Live, won all these Emmys. And so it's like, yeah, this is going to be interesting. So anyway, so we have this and so this was on the NBC lot where Ellen was and the Tonight Show. So we really have a small staff, only about 4, I would say there are like 4 writers, me, we had a really compact thing to do these 4 hours of comedy every night, so it was just kind of insane. And then, so at first we didn't even have an audience, but then it was like, well, who's going to laugh at the joke? So we put in some bleachers. We got some people there for the audience. And then that meant I had to hire a warm-up guy. So I did. And it was I want to say the guy's name, hilarious and very funny. But Dennis,
Wait,
Dennis.
who was it?
I'm trying to, Fraser Smith. Fraser?
Oh, I love Fraser. Yeah, sure. I love him.
He did exactly what we hired him to do. He got the audience all excited and hooked up. And Dennis, after a couple of times, goes, "I don't know about the warm-up guy." I go, "What do you mean?" He goes, "Hey, gets him too revved up." I go, "But that's his job." he gets them warmed up. He goes, yeah, but then they're all excited, and I come out, and I'm like, well, what do you? He goes, yeah, we got to let them go. I go,
Oh
I'm
my
like,
God.
okay. I go, well, then, so what? I go, who do you want to warm up the audience? He goes, well, you did it at HBO. You can do it now. I'm like, yeah, but I'm the EP, I'm the head writer, and now I'm doing warm up. And it's like, and this is, so what would happen is I'd literally be, throwing out pot holders with Dennis Miller's name on them to the audience. And in my headphones, I would get a thing like, here, the first guest is not in the chair because we do remotes. Like, well, wait, who's the first guest? Bishop Tutu. And then Dennis, like, throw that guy a pot holder. And I was like, wait, Bishop Tutu is not in the chair. He's not, Bishop Tutu I got to, wait, and he goes, this throw him a pot holder. What's going on? He can't see. So it's the insanity of that. And then what I had to do was, because I too, as a comedian, would get the audience ready, but then Dennis would come in, and then for whatever reason, we talked about self-destructive comedians, we go, you know what, thanks for guys for being here. I guess you couldn't make it, I guess Ellen was full. And then the audience was like, well, no, we wanted to be here. What, are we wrong? And so I had to time the warm up, so I ended and the show would start seconds later, so he wouldn't have a chance to talk to the audience for what I called the cool down session after we warmed them up. So so it was kind of a insane sort of world to kind of do that. And so what ended up doing is, and again, it was hard to get an audience. It was during the day. There was Ellen. There was the Tonight Show. So you would get, audiences that weren't great. One time they came and they said, hey, I just wanted to let you know, Dennis was already his position. It's like, there are 10 people in the audience who are adults that are learning disabled. I'm like, oh, okay. Where are they? So I didn't want to tell him that. So then I look and there's, 10 adults, all well dressed with ties and things. And I'm like, I'm not going to say anything. And it turns out they were one of the best audience we had, because I don't know if they got the jokes or not, but they would laugh when the people around them would laugh. They would applaud when they would applaud. I'm like, bring those guys back anytime. And he never knew that these were people, in the audience. So
that's hilarious. Yeah.
So we had big guests. I remember, the thing I was talking about now, we talk about Trump. The Apprentice was going at that time. So we had as our guest Donald Trump, and Melania came in. And I just remember, because we were in this small little studio and Trump basically came in and looked around like, what the fuck is this? It's like, there's bleachers, there's a small set, we didn't have, in fact, for the very first show, we didn't even have production assistants. And we told the CNBC guys, like, hey, our talent department we need production assistants. Like, we don't have those at CNBC. You don't need them. And our first guest was Arnold Schwarzenegger. So Schwarzenegger, we're getting ready. It's the first show, all technical stuff. And all of a sudden we look and Schwarzenegger's sitting on the set. And it's like, well, what? Where is he? What? And then Arnold's like, let's go. Let's do the show. It's like, well, we're not ready. There's a monologue thing first, but there's no production assistant. And so Arnold is like, why can't we go now? We need to go now. And it's like, it's Schwarzenegger. So like, all right, let's do him and then we'll do the monologue. And that was the only way we got production assistants, because then they finally saw like why you needed them. But these people didn't really do this before. So
they need production assistants, obviously, to lead people around, tell them where to go. There's a whole chain of command. Yeah. Everybody's on a walkie-talkie. Everybody has to talk. Yeah, communicate.
They were used to news guests where it's like, oh, okay, there's this, a congressman comes and he's not TV savvy. It's just like, wait here, we'll get you. And then, but stars that we were having on the show, Sylvester Stallone is like, yeah, well, what am I doing? I'm used, I've been doing talk shows for 20 years,
Yeah, who's my handler? Like, who's telling me what's going on? But when that would happen, would you guys bust out laughing, or was it very tense and scary?
Well,
like, who said Arnold Schwarzenegger's on the set? Get him off the set.
Yeah, well, yeah, you can't. No, I did, and then it was always late night's always a battle because there's always, but they don't. Most people, unless you're doing it really, for people who've done it, the infrastructure of executives who were brought up on it, like Carson, Johnny Johnny Carson, they don't know. It's all new to them, and it's a different sort of world, So they don't know because they don't have that experience, and it's just like, hey, we're putting on a giant show, and we need these things. Like, how do I trust you? So that's always been the case for all these sort of shows to have. So one night. All of a sudden Dennis came in and said, hey, you know what? Did you see the news? I'm like, what? He said, oh, Johnny Carson passed away. I'm like, oh, I didn't realize that. And he was like, yeah, he was, it was one of those things where, Leno was doing his show. So Dennis said to me, he goes, hey, do you want to go over to see the Tonight Show tonight? They're kind of doing, a memorial for Johnny. And they said, then the two guests are going to be Don Rickles and Bob Newhart. And I was like, oh, yeah, you know what? Are you kidding me? Go to the Tonight Show, the night that Johnny Carson passed away, and then hang out backstage with Rickles and Newhart, So I was like, yeah. And I never met Bob Newhart, but we met Rickles because Don had done the HBO show, our fourth show that was ever on the air. That was the show that we submitted to the Emmy Awards, and we won for writing that year, beating out Letterman and Leno, who were the two biggest, hottest shows, in history at that time. So it was really, we always thought like, yeah, I guess our writing was fine and good, but people saw Rickles, and I think that gave that credibility. And, so I'm like, yeah, I want to go back. And Rickles' stories for me were always legendary. My friends had seen him. He had done these different benefits. I mean, I had a friend that went to Vegas and saw him perform at the Desert Inn because he said, I could go see Rickles. Should I go? I'm like, yeah, you got to go see Rickles. So Rickles that night, his opening act was Larry King's wife, who is a singer, quote, singer, and who sang 5 songs before Rickles comes out. Now, everybody is polite, of course, and applauding, and she sings fine. And so they wait for, my friend said, so Rickles walks out, looks at the audience, who looks at Rickles, and he just goes, he's a friend. and
that is so awesome. That is amazing.
And that's only Rickles can get away with stuff. Another time they told me that Rickles did a benefit for Kirk Douglas after the stroke when Kirk was back up. It was at a restaurant in Beverly Hills, and there were heartfelt sort of condolences. Don't worry, Kirk, you'll be back working again. You're a trooper. Rickles gets up, and the first thing he says was, Kirk, you're not working again. We can't understand a fucking thing you're saying.
Can you imagine if was Kirk aware of what was going on?
Oh yeah, he was laughing hysterically. Yeah, and then the kid, So Rickles just kept it up. He's like, I don't know what you're saying. Where are you going to work again? And so anyway, so we go back. So we go to the Tonight Show. We go to the green room backstage, and then there's Rickles is there, Newhart is there, and there's also Gilbert Gottfried, who we know and love. And I work, right. So I've worked with Gilbert in New York a long time. I went with Gilbert to pick him up when he was living with his mother on the Lower East Side, and we went and had to drive up into Pennsylvania for a show, and Gilbert never really left New York. And so when we get up there, Gilbert is looking at the audience, which is like farmers, and he's like, oh, this is not good. This is not good. Because they're not going to get his humor. But Gilbert's a genius when it comes to comedy. He would do a Gilbert joke, and he would put on glasses and go, and as the audience go, that's not funny. That's not a joke. This is a joke. And then he would tell an old joke, and they'd laugh. And he got through it. So Gilbert is there, Leno is there, and Gilbert is in a giant chicken costume. So he walks in, he's in a costume, he's holding the chicken head in his arm. They had just done some sort of pre-tape with Gilbert, and Gilbert comes in, and again, being the aficionado of comedy, starts breaking down the segment like it's a Shakespearean comedy. This is what I should do, all in the bizarreness of in a giant chicken costume.
Oh,
yeah.
Man.
So now it's like Newhart and Jay and all those guys start to talk about their Johnny Carson stories, about the first time they met Carson. Somebody whipped out a story about Johnny Carson on the Carson roast. that was triple X rated because the PG part of it was when Carson accepted the award, which was like a gold goblet. He took a piss in it in front of
Oh
the
my
audience.
God, that's
So
hilarious.
that was at the Friars Club. I don't know how dirty I could be, but it's
Yeah, it's all right.
so they're telling they're telling this story about how Sally Field was in the audience, and this old sort of Borscht Belt comic came up and told this story in front of Carson about, hey, I see Sally Field was here, and Sally Field is with her husband. So this guy just comes up and says, "Oh, Sally Field's here. Yeah, she was in the men's room before the show, blowing me." He goes, I come," and she goes, "You like me. You really, really like me." So those are the type of stories
Oh,
that you're like, "Oh, what, are you kidding me?" That thing from hearing Carson and seeing those guys in Dangerfield, all those on those shows. And then hearing that was like, wow, this is a really special moment. And then so finally the stage manager comes and says, hey, we're getting ready for the show. We got to get makeup. And so Jay leaves. And then so we follow both Rickles and Newhart out down this hallway. You go down and you make a left. You go where makeup and that is. So as we go down the hallway, Newhart's first, and so I'm kind of following the group. All of a sudden, out of nowhere, this guy pops out like a spider and goes, "Oh, Mr. Newhart, hi, it's Billy Bush." And Newhart just looks at him and is like, "Oh," because he's the non-plus guy. He just goes, "Oh, hi, Bob
yeah.
Newhart," and he walks away. And then we get closer again. Billy Bush pops out right this time into Rickles' face and goes, "Oh, Mr. Rickles, hi, I'm Billy Bush." Rickles, without a second, just comes in an inch from his nose. He goes, "Ooh, what a treat. I just met Billy Bush. Everybody, I met Billy Bush." And this keeps on it. And I'm like, oh, this is like even better than those stories because I'm seeing Rickles, in real life. Now, remember I told you that we had Trump on the show?
Right.
And there's Billy Bush. Why? Because Trump, after our show, did the Access Hollywood taping. And so it was the night that Johnny Carson died, but also the night that Billy Bush's career died, and he didn't even know it. So was an interesting sort of for me of like, wow, what a bookend. Years later, I'm like, I looked it up. I'm like, yeah, that's when Trump was here. That's when Billy Bush, that's Access Hollywood. He was doing promotional stuff.
Wow.
And so all that kind of tied in together.
Wow. What a night to be there. What a Hollywood night.
Yeah, it was an interesting, especially since a kid who grew up in upstate New York, his parents' deli, watching Carson and all those guys on TV to kind of go, hey, you know what? I'm part of this little circle.
Unbelievable. Wow. You were around so many geniuses. So Trump, that must have happened. I'm trying to think of the timeline because when I think of that Access Hollywood tape, I see it like it's about 4:00 in the afternoon or so. That's when Trump seemed to arrive
so obviously Trump was there. He was doing some other press for Apprentice. So he did like our show, he did much of the Access Hollywood. I think he did a tour of like the soaps that were there. I'm sure he was on the Tonight Show at some, there. And so that's where, at that time with Billy Bush and Access Hollywood, that's where that whole coming off the bus type of thing happened.
Unbelievable. How was Trump on your show? Did he get along with Dennis Miller? Yes, I guess.
Yeah. The Trump, I met him there, but I've talked to people too that, had worked with him like on Saturday Night Live. And there's a side of Trump that is the personable Trump. Had to be, it's like, oh, hey, so, obviously he can't be the caustic Trump all the time, but he's more of the, oh, how are you? Yeah, that Eddie. Well, nice, hey, give me a call anytime. That type of thing.
He's the perfect guy to run a golf course. He's absolutely perfect to go around the room, say hi to everybody, have a meal, play golf, go to sleep. So I don't even think he necessarily wants to be the president. He just doesn't want to lose. It's something about that.
No, I don't think he wants to lose. No, he can't be that because, if you talk to people all his life, he was kind of called a loser. And because, by his father, and he wanted to be the winner. And, although he did lose all that sort of money and all those things. And so that's what I would have never if somebody said back then, Trump should be president one day, you'd be like, yeah, okay, how would that ever happen?
Yeah, and I've talked to Larry King, seriously, a couple of times on this show.
Yeah.
And he always says, like Trump was a big joker, he was the clown in the room, but it didn't bother anybody. He was just a fun guy to hang out with, not a problem. But a president, it makes no sense,
Yeah, right.
It doesn't even correlate.
Right. And like The Apprentice, because I've talked to people that worked on The Apprentice, that show is so structured, non-scripted that really he just had to be that persona, say you're fired, say the lines, and go home.
Yeah.
But what people saw was, there's this, billionaire genius and that reality, people forget that reality TV is not real.
Yeah.
It's not documentary. Reality is non-reality. But everybody, including people I know and love, will say to me, like, oh, I can't believe those housewives, they always argue when they get together. Yeah, that's how it's supposed to be.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, I know. It's so funny that people are that dumb sometimes. You think I remember when not the Amazing Race. It was the one they were on an island, Survivor or something.
Yes.
And I would say to my next door neighbor, Wendy, this is all scripted. You know that. And she's like, no, it's not. No, it's not. I'm like, Wendy, Carolyn downstairs works on the props for Survivor.
Yeah.
She'll tell you.
Yeah.
People just truly think it's real.
Or somebody like my sister-in-law said, oh, I watched that Duggar show, and they registered at the 99-cent store. I go, yeah, you know why? She go, why? I go, because their producer said, hey, why don't we have them register at the 99-cent store because we'll use that as like, right. What? It's like, yeah, their personalities are real. Why do you think that if housewives hated each other in New York, they would go out for drinks, once a week? No.
Yeah. Well, it's funny. I've had people on the show, and I have a couple of good girlfriends who are like way into that. And I don't understand it, but I would have watched The Sopranos, and I've still watched about every year I go through the series.
Yeah.
Like I would watch that. Like I want to know those people. I want to be in that family, or I want to, watch that family. It's really the same thing. It's just different tastes. So I don't mean to be critical. Yeah.
No, but The Sopranos, like you'd see James Gandolfini, and you're like, that's not Tony Soprano out in the street. That's James Gandolfini. Whereas someone like Chrisley, that sort of guy is like, oh, he plays both parts. It actually, as you also saw, that I work for the WWE, and that's a good way to describe that. Is like, hey, you know what? You're a character. But in wrestling, you're supposed to be that character all the time. It's called kayfabe.
It's called what?
Kayfabe is a Carney term, which means I'm working on a animated show about wrestling. So I broke my arm and I wrote an episode of Blackish where the star Anthony Anderson breaks his arm, and in it, his arm is broken. But now if I saw Anthony Anderson on the street, his arm's not going to be broken because it wasn't really broken. In wrestling, if your arm is broken in the ring, you better wear that cast when you go out in the street because people think that's you. The same thing, that's you want to keep that story going, and you want to. Are you kidding me? No, and that was a big thing in wrestling, where you have to live that life. It's called living the gimmick. So it's an interesting world that we're exploring in this thing. So it's a whole different sort of, but that's what Trump comes with.
Yeah. So they leave. So the wrestler is leaving his house, and before he leaves his house, he's got to grab crutches or he has to grab his prop.
That's right. Right, because if they see you, in fact, there's stories about years ago where people were more into this than maybe they are now, where a good guy went in front of an arena when they're going to the event, saw the bad guy and went up to him in front of the fans to say hello, like, hey, Bob. And that bad guy slapped him in the face. And he's like, and he was shocked. He goes, what are you doing? He goes, you can't do this. You can't come up. We have this storyline where I hate you. So I got to show, that's our fans. And it was like, what? It's like, yeah, that's what we need to do.
That is insane.
And there was a story once of these guys who were together in a private plane flying to an event. They crashed The one guy pulled himself out of the plane because he couldn't be found with the bad guy because it was like it would ruin the storyline. That's how into it the wrestlers
That
are.
is unbelievable. I find it.
That'll be for another time. I'll tell you
I
that
would love to
stuff.
hear that. I find it so interesting that there are so many people interested in things like I know nothing about. Like one time, my buddy takes me down to see USC play on a Saturday afternoon, the Trojans, at the stadium downtown in LA, and I look around, I'm like, huh. So this is what 100,000 people are doing on Saturday afternoon. I didn't know. It's so funny, right?
Yeah, it's like that NASCAR thing of like, okay, I would think 5 hours of watching cars go in an oval would be boring, but hey, hundreds of thousands of people do it, and it's like an event and they love it. So, okay. That's what they're doing.
Okay, one more quick example would be I used to be a flight attendant, and I had in first class one time this race car driver, Rusty.
Oh, I know. I can't think.
Anyway,
Yeah.
I asked, he wanted a beer, and I said, oh, well, we have, this, and this. And he goes, oh, I have to have Miller Lite. And I'm like, what? And he goes, yeah, I have to have Miller Lite. It's in my contract. I'm like, I won't say anything. And I have like Heineken. He's like, no, I have to have Miller Lite.
Yeah, that's because, that's
It's
your
a sponsor.
Yeah, and the same like wrestling. If a fan came by and is like, oh, I saw Rusty having a Heineken and knock that out, you might use your sponsorship, which could be worth millions of dollars. So it's like, yeah, yeah, you have to it's live in the gimmick, as they say.
It's such a funny world.
That's exactly what it is.
Well, listen, Eddie, this has been so much fun. I really appreciate your
Sure.
time. What a great story.
Oh, good.
Yeah, just amazing. By the way, was Johnny Carson's wife there?
I don't think she was because at that show, because remember, it really just was the night that he had, that day he had passed away. So I think she might have come a different time. I don't remember her being there. In fact, I was just checking with one of the writers because I don't even think Jay did a monologue that night. I think they went, as I remember, just right in to the kind of memorial with those two guys.
Did they let the audience that was in the street, the audience waiting to get into the show, did they let those people in?
Yeah, they had an audience that night, I believe. It was a while. I checked with I was just checking with one of the writers to say, I forgot about the audience, but I'm pretty sure that they did have the audience, for that,
That
for
must
applause
have been
and stuff.
amazing.
Yeah.
Yeah, that must have been really interesting to have them there. Well, I'm thrilled with your story. That must have been the craziest hallway you've ever walked down. Like,
yeah, it was.
you'll never forget that hallway.
No. And again, with being with all those people, friends and then comedians and then the little Billy Bush.
What do you think? Yeah, what do you think Billy Bush thinks now when he sees Trump and everything?
I think he thought like, hey, here's this guy. I'm kidding around with him. Yeah, laughing at him. I didn't say those things. So I'm sure he's like, he's like this collateral damage of this president, which seems to be one of a long list of collateral damage anybody around him. It's like,
I know. And now like 27 people have COVID because of his events. It's just, I mean, that's just around him. That's not counting the thousands of people that got spread, whatever.
Right.
Well, listen, you're amazing. And I really want you to come on the Story Worthy Hour of Power, tell a true 10-minute story, amazing, and then Judge, Story Smash, you'll laugh your butt off.
Oh, yeah, I look forward to that.
Here's what we can do, Eddie. Me and you, then we go through the whole process. You just explain to me about how we get a network and how we get the crew and how we break it down. And, we'll get this game show up and running.
That sounds good.
It's the perfect pandemic show. It's the perfect pandemic show.
Yeah, I'd love to do that. You're
so sweet.
Okay.
All right, you guys. One more time on behalf of the very, very, very talented Eddie Feldmann. Thank you so much again. I really appreciate it.
Okay. Thank you very much. It was fun.
All right, you guys, one more time on behalf of the very talented Eddie Feldmann. Follow him over there on Twitter and also tell him how much you loved his story. You'll find him there at Eddie Feldmann. And Feldman has two N's.
That's correct.
It's exciting. All right, you guys. One more time, thank you so much for tuning in. My name is Christine Blackburn saying, make it a story-worthy week.
Thanks for joining us on the Storyworthy Podcast. We'll be back next week with all new stories. Subscribe to Storyworthy on iTunes and visit the Storyworthy website at storyworthypodcast.com.
It's time to roll out the red carpet for, well, new carpet. Right now at the Home Depot. Choose from hundreds of styles and colors from top brands. Plus, get free installation. So whether you want to brighten up your bedroom, add a little more cushion to your living room, or, yes, add some VIP flair to your hallway, you can get the perfect carpet to match your mood with free installation from the Home Depot. How doers get more done. Minimum purchase of $4.99. Exclusions apply. U.S. only. See store for details.
Membership fees apply after free trial. Cancel anytime.
Can I be real for a second? That goal you have to exercise and eat better, you really can do it. But nobody is going to do it for you. And nobody has to, because you can do it if you have the right tools and a community that cares about helping you get results. And that's us, Beachbody. It's as convenient as your TV or laptop, but you need to decide that you're worth it. Let us help you succeed. Here's how. Go to beachbody.com to claim your free membership and start feeling great.